welcome to episode 1 of the Customer First Thinking podcast. My name is Stephen Shaw. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of Kellogg Communications, and the mission of this podcast is to hear from recognized and emerging thought leaders in marketing on the future of their profession. We live in a time of massive disruption, as we all know, where a big shift is going on in marketing theory and practice. Every business is faced with transforming their approach to marketing and adopting a new playbook based on putting the needs of customers first. In this very first episode, I think it's fitting that we start with Philip Kotler, who's been called the father of modern marketing. He's on record as saying that marketing will be markedly different in future, and we wanted to understand what he meant, exactly how different. Today, Philip Kotler is the S.C. Johnson & Son Professor of International Marketing at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University in Chicago. The American Marketing Association calls him the most influential marketer of all time. His seminal book, Marketing Management, first published in 1967, ranks among the most enduring business textbooks of all time. Now, in its 15th edition, is still the most authoritative guide to the practice of marketing. Half a century ago, marketing played a fairly minor role in influencing business strategy, but Kotler, a trained economist, understood that the growth rate of a company was governed by much more than simply the market response to product and price. It depended on being customer-driven. His book gave inspiration to a profession in search of legitimacy. Since then, each new edition of his book has reflected the evolution of marketing, keeping it as relevant as ever, even to a generation of digital natives raised on social media. His latest, co-authored book, Marketing 4.0, addresses even more directly the need to transform marketing practices, calling for a more humanistic model. In this interview, Philip Kotler shares his views on the current state of marketing, the future role it will play in shaping a better world, and the need to put customers first. So let me just start with a somewhat provocative question. You have been the world's leading marketing academic for half a century. You are acknowledged as the father of marketing. Given where we are today and all that you see that's going on and the disruption and the turbulence in the marketplace, is there a need, and you've written a textbook on modern marketing, is there a need to step back and actually rewrite that textbook for the next generation?
Steve, yes. In a real sense, we're finding that what we worked with in the modern marketing period, and by the way, I'm known really as the father of modern marketing, not the father of marketing. Backing up a moment, marketing is over 100, maybe 10 years old because of some early textbooks bearing that name, marketing, appearing in 1905, 1910 period by economists, not by marketing people. Economists who were unhappy with economics, leaving out two big things. Economists only talked about price. They never talked about advertising lifting the demand curve, and they never talked about distribution. That their model of price and quantity was really facing an individual customer and describing how he would react to price, going up and down. So books started to bring, in a rich way, the whole picture of advertising, media, many kinds of advertising, direct mail, and so on. Also, with rich stuff about channels of distribution. All right, so marketing was in a period there for years and years, very descriptive, very prescriptive as well, but not analytical at all. So when I wrote my edition in 1967 called Marketing Management, I based it not on price theory or something simple. I based it on organizational behavior theory, consumer psychology theory, economic theory, and also mathematics. All right, so it had a new look, and it was a risk to write a brand new type of marketing textbook, and it could have failed. It succeeded. Now, I realized subsequently that it succeeded because it gave pride to marketers. Namely, they were being charged with a lot of, descriptive work, but they weren't social scientists. They were not scientific. They were artists, so to speak. And the book gave pride to people because it introduced a lot of frameworks that they hadn't used before, and it brought it closer to what the business community really would have been interested in. So in answer to your question about whether I would rewrite the marketing textbook, well, if you look at 4.0, and we'll get to that later, you'll see that I'm trying to digitalize marketing. Everyone is trying to. But I would not drop many of the fundamental concepts in marketing. Certainly, marketing has to start with the customer. And I would just put another start on it. It has to start with the stakeholders. You can't think just about the customers. They're not going to be satisfied if the other stakeholders, like employees and others, are not satisfied. So much, let's say I would, in a brand new textbook, say 50% of what was already in the 15th edition of Marketing Management. But I would add a lot more to the 16th edition about digital and internet and Facebook and so on.
So let me just ask that question, because that book has been amazing in terms of its lifespan, because you have been able to add content, revise content, update it, etc., to reflect current practice. But we've been through a few eras now of marketing. But it seems to me we've reached a point where not many elements of what I would call the classical model have really survived or are bound to survive. And that goes back to my question about, does the framework have to be revisited? Does the textbook actually have to be written from scratch to represent this new era, as opposed to what I would say would be add-ons reflecting new and emerging media and channels? Basically, it's marketing stepping back and saying, why are we here? Is there a need to do what you did in 1967, is introduce an absolute new framework?
Okay, maybe there is. Let's start with what has to be preserved of the framework we had.
Yes.
First, we have the 4 Ps. Now, the 4 Ps are simply a framework for the tools that we have to influence the level of demand and the composition of demand, because my basic idea about a marketer is a marketer is expert at managing the level and composition and timing of demand. Because some people don't know that we're using marketing to reduce demand. We're using too much water in the world. We got to get people to be careful and conserve. So marketing thinking is about managing the appropriate level of demand for a situation that we're facing. Now, the 4 Ps, I've written a whole piece about the different versions of the 4 Ps and other Ps and so on and so forth. I would say that here's the problem. I just got into a discussion with someone. I said to him, of the 4 Ps, the 2 most important Ps are product and price. Why? Because if you don't create the right product features and set the right price for what you're offering, nothing about the channels or the promotion can make a fundamental correction of a mistake where your product and price are not right to your target customer. Sure, a clever promotion may get them to try the product, but because the price is not right for what the product consists of, the customer won't necessarily, may even say bad things, let alone not buy again. So I put a lot of emphasis starting on creating a product offer with its attributes and service attributes and price that is correct. The rest of it is just leveraging it through much more channels and also deciding how much to spend on promotion. Okay, when I told this person that, he said, I think price is the only thing that's important. Well, let's see. He said, most offers now are commodities. Most companies copy each other. It's hard to see what is fundamentally different about a lot of the offers. So product isn't that important. They're commodities. I think he already made a mistake in saying that, because if they're commodities, then the price would all converge to one price. And yet, how can he make price the most important thing? But he did go on to say, and what about channels? Channels are the same now. Anyone can get to work with Facebook and get the message delivered, and these ways of getting attention are the same. And he says promotion doesn't make much of a difference anymore. It isn't mass advertising people are using. It's information that's being sent as a message on the email or whatever. So let me say, with respect to the 4 Ps, there's a lot of different views of what's important in the 4 Ps, and whether maybe we're forgetting the 5th one, packaging, maybe the 6th one, personality of the company. I don't know. But what is important is that the 4 Ps would come after STP. I want the new marketing textbook, 16th or whatever edition, or brand new, to start with the idea we must segment, target, and position. That's fundamental. Segment, target, and position is important. Now, here's the problem about even segmentation has been challenged. I still like to think much more like, if I'm going to be McDonald's, I have to have a marketing plan for mothers with children that is different than my marketing plan for the teenager and different for the senior. So I got to define my segment before I even go to the 4 Ps. Absolutely. So 4 Ps is secondary. It comes after I know who. But someone has even challenged segmentation, saying everything's micro-targeting now. We can finally get to, we know enough about each potential customer that we could set our plan for that potential customer so that messages and offers reach him or her at the right time, in the right place, and so on. So it may be a message sent 3:30 a.m. in the morning. For some reason, it's the right time that it should be loaded on his computer as an offer. So micro-targeting is an attack on segmentation, basically, and I have to balance that and think we need both segmentation and then followed with micro-targeting.
So I am an absolute personal believer in the value of segmentation, because what you seem to be addressing of the issue of micro-targeting or personalization at scale is ultimate individualization and recommendations around the specific products that somebody might be interested in, but that still requires a product to be made, and you don't make products for individuals, you basically make them for segments of individuals who share similar needs, and you have been a huge proponent from the beginning of customer needs orientation and marketing.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. We're in total agreement. And by the way, it reminds me of that book by Mark Penn, which he called Micro Trends, the Small Forces Behind Tomorrow's Big Changes. So he says, well, someone might say my target is working retireds. Someone else may say interracial families. And so he has a whole list of creative identification of groups. that you could make a fortune on by serving them because they've been neglected in the mass marketing approach.
It's interesting, Phil, though, traditional organizational structures seem to separate out the product marketing piece from marketing, the channel marketing piece. And the channel marketing piece are the guys spending inordinate sums of money to reach audiences. And to me, that's one of the key inflection points today is the barriers that have been thrown up and that prevent that kind of targeting, as you have alluded to it, means a different approach is required. Isn't that what's at the heart of your Marketing 4.0 book, which is, your Marketing 3.0 called for a more humanistic model, and when I read that, I went, hurrah. What distinguishes 4.0 from 3.0? I know you are focusing on the digitalization of business in that book, but it goes beyond that. What would you say are the key things that separated when you wrote in collaboration, wrote 3.0 in 2010, I believe, and today? What would be the difference between those two frameworks, 4.0 and 3.0?
Marketing 3.0 came out of a realization that there were three business orientations toward market opportunities. The first was Marketing 1.0, which is not the title of any book, but it is the company that sees that it simply has to describe the offer in a functional way. Why? Here, Mr. Customers, why you should buy from us, because here's what we're selling. And it's unemotional, it's just factual. It's very factual. It's the way the Russians would consider marketing, that you just describe what the product will do. Okay, and then Marketing 2.0 was the realization that emotions work very importantly in the choices made by consumers. And in fact, don't give up giving them their information, 1.0, but add the emotional appeals. Okay. Now, I could have stopped there because that itself is a revolution to go from 1.0 to 2.0.
Yes.
I felt very strongly that there's another level, which was very humanistic. And maybe spirit levels. Not spiritual. I don't want to confuse it that way.
But the search for meaning, right? The search for meaningfulness.
As meaningfulness, and putting meaningfulness in the lives of customers in their choice of things. Make your offer something that will advance their level, improve their life, and it may be a compassionate thing. So now that had nothing to do with Marketing 4.0. That was a distinction between three orientations of a company. 4.0 was written because of the need to build in the digital revolution, internet, Facebook, into marketing thinking. So 4.0 is not a 3.0. It's not like we went from 3.0 to something even higher than, a very conscious humanistic marketing. It was really to review marketing freshly from the point of view of what is the digital revolution doing to it.
And you, in 4.0, there are obviously a number of facets to it, but one of the key ones that strikes me is the idea that you're managing the customer life cycle from awareness to advocacy. And that has been, it strikes me, as a key point behind the whole customer relationship marketing movement that began, as far back as the late 90s and early 2000s. The idea that behaviorally you could sort of manage that relationship with a customer over time and serve up appropriate offers and treatment over time to reflect the state of the relationship. Is it fair to say that's a core principle of 4.0?
That is a core, yes. Thanks for pointing that out. There's funnels that people use to identify customers and stages and all that. Basically, we ended up with a system of stages, and the main thing that's being today talked about is you want a customer who is engaged, and beyond that, an advocate. That if you can say, and this came up with the net promotion score too. Basically, the reason that was such a sensation is allowed us to know how many customers go around advertising for us. As a matter of fact, if I had a real sign of success would be a company that never does advertising. It's all done by their customers. It's word of mouth. It's the power of word of mouth, a positive recommendation. And so I don't want to collect a lot of customers. You remember you asked a question about growth. Is there some contradiction between growth and maybe the quality?
We're gonna get there.
Yeah,
we haven't quite got there. But I do want to touch on that.
Don't forget about it. But the main thing is we want to. Some people are now talking about customer scoring. Michael Solomon has just agreed to be writing a column once a month for Forbes magazine, and he came out with his first column recent issue, and it was very good. Because, let's go back to something. Customer is the starting point in the old and the new marketing. Okay, but not all customers are equal. They must be treated a little differently, and maybe too many companies don't recognize that. And what Michael was talking about is scoring the customer's quality, which would feed in, which would come out of lifetime customer analysis. In other words, let's treat our better customers in an even better way. So it is really not equal treatment for all customers. Some customers should be dropped. Some customers should be given just very little, and so on and so forth. Now, that I just got off on a tangent, but there's a lot of qualifications to how important you make the customer. You make it, they're your focus, of course, but your plans for different customers will vary greatly.
So I want to just shift slightly, Phil, to another core concept that you've written about and talked about, and which again resonates strongly with me. First of all, the humanistic positioning around 3.0 struck me as ahead of its time, because you're starting to see that now surface in the concept of brand purpose. We're going to come to that shortly. But this idea of holistic marketing also struck me, which is to say that marketing needs to, if I may, in not so many words, it is move or grow, I should say, beyond the functional boundaries it's traditionally stayed within. And I'm suggesting here that marketing's role in companies have been reduced over the last 20 years, and doesn't have the ear of the CEO. And I think in part because marketing is viewed as the demand generation department or the pretty picture department. But it strikes me in your concept of holistic marketing that marketing has a bigger role to play, a larger role to play in steering the organization forward based on the quality of the customer experience, and that can only be delivered upon by affecting all operational areas of the company, not simply marketing and messaging and positioning. Is that a fair summary, or do you have a sort of different perspective on what that really means? The concept
holistic, yes. Holistic marketing works very much with the concept of shaping an experience for the customer that goes beyond what the product functionally is all about. For example, let's take Starbucks. Starbucks could have just been a store where you sit down on a chair and get your drink and you leave. That's not Starbucks. That's many other competitors to Starbucks. Starbucks enhanced the experience to be found in going into that kind of restaurant, all the way from the woodwork to the types of coffee, so many types, to the meeting our friends there. And that concept of this is your third home. Your first one is your family, your second is your office, this is your third, Starbucks is your third home. That's a holistic view. And it was more holistic because the people serving us are themselves highly respected by management. They're not just clerks, they're what's the fancy word they call them, baristas.
Yeah. Baristas.
And they're going to go to college too. In fact, some of them are going to get money from Starbucks to be helped in that respect. It's holistic. It's the whole experience. It's a stakeholder view. Starbucks is saying it's not just a coffee house. It enhances the lives of more than just the customer. It enhances the lives of the others who drop in to meet others and the employees. So we want more companies to expand on what their purpose is and what they're impacting. So it's not just the sale. The sale is, yeah, go ahead.
Well, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, Phil. God help, I should not be interrupting Philip Kotler.
No.
But I want to pick up on a key point that I think you're saying is the interconnectedness of stakeholders is really crucial to success here in providing that more holistic marketing approach, which leads to a better customer experience. I think that's what you're saying, is it?
Yes, definitely. It's a very ecological view. People are to each other and to systems proposed for them, offered to them to make their lives better. And there's a great interconnectedness of elements taking place. And when we talk about designing the customer's experience, we take that into account. The car, you buy a car, yes, you sell it on many grounds of style and so on. But basically, what is the purpose of your car company? It's not just transportation. That would be a marketing 1.0 view. It's not just an emotional fix. If you bought the Mercedes or whatever, fundamentally, it is to deliver a safe and reliable experience, or at least it takes an auto company to distinguish itself from other companies by giving it a brand. Now, branding is key. My first few books on marketing, editions of marketing management, barely said much more than a page or two on branding because it was just a name you have to choose and so on. Marketing went through such a stage when branding started to be talked about by Dave Ocker, who really deserves credit in bringing us a greater consciousness about branding.
Yes.
But it went overboard as if marketing was under branding. Branding was the whole story, which is dumb in my mind because the brand was built out of marketing, and the brand needs pricing and a whole bunch of other things or it won't work. But branding, what I loved about it is it's storytelling. It's a narrative. If you are not good at that, and that's why I like Dave Ocker's talk about finding a signature story.
Yes.
Not just the story. That's an important book. And, of course, it's behind L.L. Bean, that they will take back a product that the customer 5 years later wasn't really that happy with and replace it free. And it's the story of Starbucks. It's the story of great brands. Great brands have a signature story, basically.
So they do, and that's been another big shift, hasn't it? I mean, the concept of brand identity and positioning has gone through, and I'm glad to see you referring to David Ocker, one of my ever favorite writers on marketing. The concept of branding is going through a major shift now as well, and this certainly is the concept of brand purpose. So you're seeing, it seems to me, a lot of traction around that in recent years, where the brand is no longer a vehicle to doing better advertising, but in fact, it becomes a North Star for the organization in doing what you were describing earlier, is bringing various stakeholders together to rally under a single banner of helping people. And that again goes back to marketing 3.0, because that seems to me that's about helping people. The concept of brand purpose is about helping people, it strikes me. So, go back to my question very early in this conversation about the elements of the classical marketing model that will be left behind. That old way of thinking about how to build a brand seems to me to need to undergo significant revision, beginning with the concept of brand purpose. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I do believe that we have to maybe start our book with much more about what does it mean to build a brand and why and how. And basically that, and it would start with a lot of living stories of brands that have fans. Doesn't it go back to the question of don't just have customers, you're trying to create fans. And in doing that, you do it by giving them a meaningfulness, you built a meaningful relationship. Of trust. There's trust there. The trust is that company is really doing more to help me live a better life. Yeah, so let's mention Nordstrom. Nordstrom got a lot of people to like it because I went in to buy a tie, and they were happy to have very nice ties. They knew that the tie is part of a system of clothing and I have to get to do more than just have a tie. And they don't, without pressuring of any kind, they wouldn't maybe walk you over to the shirt department or the shoe department. They had a more enhanced sense of what they were about. They were to help you enjoy life more from the point of what clothing could do for one's life and so on. So purpose. Now, you could say that every company can define its purpose. I make automobiles. But there should be a higher purpose. There should be purpose and higher purpose. So when the farmer says, I grow corn, he should have said, I feed the hungry. My job is to feed the world's hungry. And so on and so forth. So I think if we could get more companies to embed their or enlarge their purpose in a larger context, it's part of the same thing of higher purpose.
Yeah, but you mentioned too a very important word, which I kind of view as the new currency of branding, which is the concept of trust. Which is interesting to me, just as a side note, that you're seeing trust in institutions and business and government falling, and given increasing controversies in the market, in the face of that skepticism, market skepticism, it seems to me it's harder to build that trust. Therefore, you have to be authentic in those brand purpose statements. You can't simply say I have a brand purpose and then simply declare that to the market. You have to live that brand purpose. Do you not?
You do, because here's the issue. More companies are getting into social responsibility. They're sort of been pressured into thinking that they should care about more than their own product sale. And then there could be some window dressing going on. Is it authentic that the company is caring about climate, or is it just the right thing to talk about? So the company might say, yeah, I think what we should do is have we agree to the idea of a carbon tax, because we do release some bad things into the air, and we should pay a carbon tax. They can say that, but the question is, they'll probably resist when they hear the amount. They'll probably resist it. So it's evidential. For trust to be built, claims made by about social responsibility have to be, some people say, intrinsic, not extrinsic to the operation. Let's take Michael Porter. He has developed a concept called shared company value, something like that, maybe SCV, where he says this is not a matter of having a cause and talking about having it. It should be intrinsic to your thinking about everything you're doing in the business. So if climate is a big concern, it shows up in everything you're doing. Conservation shows up, and so on. So trust. We don't want our company to be skewered by someone who points out that we didn't really do much about what we claimed in social responsibility. So let's get down and do it thoroughly and have the evidence and not be caught.
Yes, and that's another phrase that you mentioned here that resonates particularly in the concept of shared values. And shared values meaning you can connect with people in a more meaningful way if you, in fact, see the world the same way they see it. You have a shared worldview. And that strikes me as one of the pillars of brand purpose, and why it's so hard to develop brand purpose, because which audience are you trying to share values with? And there, I'm presuming, can be different audiences that have different values. So it's a bit of a head scratcher in terms of how you resolve that contradiction, is it not?
Yes, it could be, because if you're just collecting people from a whole bunch of segments, and again, back to McDonald's, what's the role of salads? Many people don't buy a salad at McDonald's. Does McDonald's want to educate them and push them into more salad and less gross double hamburger offerings? What's the role of the tradition in marketing is give people what they want and don't judge what they want. So when a tobacco company asks me to help them get more people to smoke, I say, no, I'm not interested. I think companies do good things for customers and bad things. So consciousness, to me, the big idea now would be to be a company that we believe is there to create life value, a better life, a better life. My purpose as a bank should be to help you save more and spend more intelligently, not just give me some money as a deposit. I want to educate my customers to be smarter about saving their money intelligently, investing it intelligently, and spending it intelligently. So for each company, it has to work out how it's going to make the customer better off.
And presumably have a strong ethical overlay which dictates brand conduct. And obviously Wells Fargo would be a classic example of a company that I'm sure was trying to position itself as being an advisor, but contradicted that very approach clearly with its own behavior, which led to distrust of financial institutions generally. This is what I guess I'm referring to, and maybe I can touch on another question here about what you referenced earlier in the conversation, the idea of growth, and it strikes me that's another contradiction, is that businesses, because of the dictates of Wall Street and and the market, are committed to aggressive growth generally, and that forces marketers being accountable for demand generation and then consuming vast resources to drive demand generation. How does marketing live up to some of these new ideals we've been talking about in the face of that pressure? How does marketing become more customer-centric and put the interests of customers first, indeed put the interests of people first, in the face of this pressure to continually deliver sales and growth and so on? How do they reconcile that? They don't have the power really to fight back today. How do they get past this barrier?
Well, they, as companies, they have to be. I think they have to go back to what their purpose is. Let me go back up. First of all, I admire the companies that told Wall Street that they're not going to predict their own quarterly profits. That was Coca-Cola did that, and a few others have done that, and so immediately they're not going to be conditioned to a growth objective that they'd rather show it after it happens than to commit. Because, if they're 1 cent off of what they thought they were going to deliver as a price of their stock, I mean, they're told that they failed. They failed, and that makes the cost of capital raising more difficult. So here's the thing. If the company figures out what customers they are trying to enhance the lives of, and does a deep and successful job in building trust and innovating improvements in the lives of these customers, they don't have to worry about the number of customers, because just what we call upselling and cross-selling work very well to deliver more sales and profit. So a satisfied customer told that another product that the company makes, but he was not using that product, which is, of course, cross-selling, and that a better version, the customer can move up to a better Cadillac or a better whatever than the Cadillac they have. Upselling and cross-selling will deliver growth of sales and profit without just slapping around and grabbing a bunch of people off the street who have really not much to do with your firm, but by some enticement you get them to buy something from you. And they won't be around very long anyways. So I don't know if there's a real contradiction about you have to find more customers as opposed to do more with the customers you have.
And you can only do that, Philip, presumably, if you follow through on all the principles that you're talking about, which creates some adhesion, if you will. Otherwise, people are switching brands because they don't view you any differently in terms of your morals, your ethical conduct, your authenticity, your ability to deliver on your promises. But that's the insulation from competitive offers, it seems to me, is to build that sort of relationship. And you call it yourself in the book as a brand should be a friend.
Right, absolutely. And every company needs to rethink, get away from its traditional concept of what they want their relationship to be to a customer to a much stronger invested one. They have to invest more in each customer, and they'll get much more back for it.
So, and that's the Amazon model, frankly, isn't it? I mean, what Jeff Bezos proved is that you can thumb his nose at Wall Street, play the long game, and remain customer obsessed, and build an unbelievable colossus of a business on the back of the insight into the needs of customers. Isn't that really the new business model, not simply a new marketing model? That's the new business model, isn't it? Cross-selling, because you've built that trust that the product's going to be delivered when they say it's going to be delivered.
Yeah, yes, it is a new model in many ways, and He's been brilliant, probably our most brilliant marketer of all of them. The thing is, a guy who's just going to open up a new way to sell books. And I always wonder how far ahead he had thought from the beginning that he would end up where he is now. Sometimes it happens just because moving to the next step. And then that suggests something else. I don't know if the whole picture was there. If it was, then he was super brilliant. But here's the thing. Look what's happening there's two areas of the business world and the marketing world that are changing so much. I would not buy an advertising agency now. I wouldn't buy a store-based a store-based
a bricks and mortar based store. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I don't mean that someone can't make money in a few cases, but when you buy, look what's happening to WPP and these huge. For example, one of the things is the ad business, which was going to be based on mass marketing, adds on by buying some digital firms, so they could also offer digital services, and they did acquire, either work with or buy some digital firms. And now we're finding out that most of us would recommend that the digital operation be always inside the firm, not bought by subscription from some outside agency. So even the thing that ad agencies have been trying to get on top of by selling digital services, a lot of companies, the big companies, believe they better have the digital inside, because you work fast with that. You spot a city that something's happening in, and you want to send out messages faster and all that. All right, now the store-based, the retailing. The reason I wouldn't buy a store-based thing is that my wife does not shop at any store. She doesn't go into stores. Everything's out online. Everything's online. More people are going to, and that's the Amazon gift to us too. It's so easy to find whatever you need to come back and be delivered in a day. But did you hear about the Amazon Go store?
Yes.
The cash list. It doesn't have cashiers,
right?
And you don't pay anything immediately. You're going to be billed, and there's no lines. You just go in, you buy. I mean, the genius is unbelievable. So stores are going to have real problems about surviving in this new world. That's why you can't just take the old textbook and keep talking about stores and advertising when they're going through such transformation.
So I want to come back to Philip, because you're touching on a really important point, and that is the disruption that's going on, the challenges to conventional business models, the orthodoxy, the speed of disruption is obviously a huge factor here. But before I leave the subject, because you mentioned ad agencies, and they obviously are suffering because their business model hasn't caught up with business, because their own revenue model was ad-based. We see advertising dollars shift out of traditional media, obviously, to digital. But even then, there's a massive cloud now hanging over digital advertising. Do you, in advertising, as you pointed out, that very early on in this conversation, has traditionally played a huge factor in affecting demand levels. So what happens if we become an ad-free world?
So first of all, ad block is a big thing, and it could grow.
Sure.
I mean, I have statistics on how it is. Let's see where they are about the countries that are blocking now. Let's see. Indonesia is. This is from Bloomberg. Ad blockers. 58%. Is the percentage of users with ad blockers. Germany, 29%, Canada, 24%. We're only at 18% when this was done. All right. And so one thing that's going to happen, well, we do know that people generally don't welcome interruption. and therefore they're going to take arms against this certainly with phone calls. Phone calls are such an irritant to people that when they try to sell you on something. So now, if ads stop working because people are successful at blocking them or avoiding them, what is going to happen to the money that has been budgeted a large percentage for advertising? All right, you raise that question somewhere, and here's what the money could be used for. You have you have a lower cost now, so lower your price. Of course, if this simultaneously happens to you and your competitors, and they all end up lowering their price, there's no gain for any particular one. You could put more money into innovation. You could put more money into better service. Service is the key. And we have neglected service. We have sold products without paying the attention we need to the service being good. For example, you remember the time you'd buy a computer and you came across problems and you call up and your wait time is 2 or 3 hours. It's still happening. Apple has done a great thing in my experience at least, is that when you have a question, their service is there to help you answer it without that idea, we'll call you back in 24 hours. So companies must, especially high-tech companies, but others as well, have to build on service, because there may not be dimensions of product that allow differentiation as much as before. But back to your question. Go ahead once again.
Well, I just wondered about the implications of an ad-free, the possibility. I don't think it's even remotely possible that will never be ads. There's always planes you can skywrite, and billboards outside, I suppose, and digital advertising all over the place. But the fact is that traditional channels for advertising are fading away, and the future of advertising seems to me a big question mark right now because of the payback question, and marketing. One of marketing's sins, if you will, is the inability to really demonstrate and prove its contribution to the bottom line. Hence, it's always the first thing to be cut, and that is something that doesn't seem to ever change. And so I may go back to my question: if marketers no longer become a broadcast funnel or have that role, where do those dollars go? Back into the general ledger? You're suggesting no, it will go back into enhancing the value proposition, if I understand you correctly.
Service and also innovation, new things, and lower prices possibly. But here's the thing. The basic question then is, do we need any marketing in a company? Since what it did well in the past won't work as much. So let's look at it this way. The CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, first of all, the smart one will spend 50% not doing anything with his own marketing group, but working to make sure that finance and human resources and so on accept what he can do and carry out what is needed for a full business plan to work. And then he's going to also he or she's going to spend time making the marketing group much more efficient by giving them trainings in new technologies within marketing, such as predictive analytics, discriminant analysis, cluster analysis, and all that. So now, even then, the CMO doesn't get the respect that finance gets, of course. One knows that. As a matter of fact, CMO is always working for the CFO. The CFO is going to set the budget and will ask for the return on marketing investment, ROMA. And the best thing the CMO can do is work very closely and friendly, like with the CFO, to co-develop a measurement system that will give enough confidence to the CFO, who really runs the CEO to some extent. Either he's going to be satisfied that the money is not being thrown away or not. All right. Now, some people have challenged the CMO concept because we're talking about what's the future of marketing, what can it do in a company. One proposal is it really should be a CCO, Chief Customer Officer, who keeps the company very focused in all ways on what anything they do to the customer affect it positively or negatively. I don't know if that's such a person doesn't have price and a bunch of other things. That is not a 4P person to be a Chief Customer Officer. However, the other concept came about, the Chief Revenue Officer. That basically that is a full understanding that just like someone is a full cost manager, let's say logistics people are managing the cost of this and of delivery and all that. We need someone to manage, and that the normal CMO is not a chief revenue officer. Very often, he's not even setting the price. He's not working, influencing enough the product development people. So, but a chief revenue officer might really say, I need the following following influence in order to get the revenue to grow. In any case, now here's the real problem. It's even more basic. That the company doesn't think marketing is going to be the big growth factor. It will produce marginal growth. They never expect marketing to be a big source of growth because when the CEO sees an opportunity to buy a company, he sees much more potential growth. He may be mistaken because half of the mergers fail to deliver what was expected. Or to put a lot of more money in innovation and the product development department will, maybe if it works, will be a big punch up. Marketing, they don't feel that everyday marketing is going to deliver a big punch in revenue or profits.
That is, it can deliver incremental gains, but not massive leap in market share without M&A activity, is what you seem to be saying.
Yeah, M&A or innovation activity can do more. So, or just the cost, smart cost innovation, which saves loads of money when you hit something right, is going to deliver more to the company than everyday marketing. So the CMO has a hard job. That's why they last about 2 years. Though that statistic has to be questioned because maybe a number of them were stolen by a competitor. Yeah, they had a 2-year job with AT&T, but they did such a good one, they were picked up. Or they were promoted out of marketing into CEO level or something. But it's, the CMOs are going crazy with what's happening, and I empathize with them very much.
But it goes back to the conversation we're having earlier. If an organization remains a slave to Wall Street, notwithstanding not reporting quarterly earnings, but clearly they have to answer to their shareholders, that shareholder first mentality is what ultimately dictates priorities, and it seems to me prevents or leads to a more myopic view. That is, no one's willing to look in the long term or plan around the long term, and so planning methods are always focused on short-term objectives. To me, that damages or harms the ability to survive challenges to a business model, doesn't it? And that ultimately challenges marketing as well.
Well, that's a reason I like a company like the Unilever company.
Yes.
Under Paul Pullman. I mean, he's a daring guy. He said he's going to double his business in so many years, and he's going to definitely cut down all the waste and watch climate very closely and be a good guy about that.
Well, and also they had that near-death experience with 3G Capital almost devouring them recently, and they managed to escape that, thankfully. And I think the other thing was their embrace of what we were talking about earlier, brand purpose. That cuts to the heart of that organization, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Every brand seems to be well thought out and exciting. You know, Axe and the women, the products for women.
Yeah,
Dove did a beautiful job.
Yeah,
You know?
Ben and Jerry's, right up and down the line of products there. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they took over Ben and Jerry's and they didn't destroy it. I mean,
They kept the values. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got some favorite companies, and of course, now on the other hand, you mentioned Amazon and that method, and that is a brilliant method. People are haters of Amazon. You know, they worry. Every retailer is a hater.
Well,
right?
I think Jeff Bezos is viewed by some as Lex Luthor. Like he's the evil villain.
The evil villain. I mean, it's one thing to make the customers life easier for customers, which he's done, but then he's destroyed a lot of small business and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So I want to just touch on a couple more questions, if you have the patience.
Before you do, let me make some miscellaneous remarks, and I'll answer any more questions.
Sure.
I also am interested in a thesis that would go in a new book that a successful company will be one that does more co-marketing with the customer. And what I mean by co-marketing is illustrated by Lego and Harley Davidson. They both invite the customer to actively participate in the development of their future. So Lego, of course, has these kids coming in, and adults, seniors, older people, developing Legos, getting excited. In other words, they built a community. Building more than a product, but building a community is the greatest thing you could do. Harley Davidson has a community. The Harleys, and I could go in if I had a motorcycle and an idea. I can go and talk to their engineering department, and they'll be welcoming me for something that would improve their motorcycle. So I'd like to see more done in the future with companies involving their customers in helping design the product.
It's interesting, too, though, Phil, in how you're describing that, because it seems to me there's a progression here that goes beyond the concept of loyalty, which lies at the heart of what you're describing. That is, the willingness of customers to commit to the success of the company because they are believers in what the company does, not just for them, but for society in general. And it's this progression from audience to follower, to believer, to cultist, ultimately in the case of Harley Davidson. And that begs the question, is part of the new framework, marketing framework, thinking about customers differently in the sense of that level of emotional connection to the brand?
Yes. And it's not just that company turns me on. That company exists to be a workshop for my own participation and getting something designed that I want. In other words, I can feel about Harley that they'd be welcoming. You see, good companies are going to do research on what the customers want. They'll do tests and so on. But once they are finished, they decide on their own, and the customer just either enjoys a product coming out of that company or not. But I'm talking about going beyond that and acting as if you're a job shop for your customers to go into and play around and figure out what could be made from that company for them. And I don't mean making a big thing for one person. Although I think in B2B there are probably a lot of examples of retooling for a big customer and working collaboratively. I guess I was pitching this model for consumer marketing, but I'm sure when GE did engines and so on, they were obviously working with the airline.
Well, you've written on B2B marketing, and I'm sure you're seeing as well that B2B marketing is moving closer to B2C marketing in the way they're using content to attract audiences, and the whole sales paradigm is being challenged as well due to that. So that's a whole. You know what, Phil? If you were ever to grant me another interview like this, that whole world of B2B marketing is fascinating.
Stay with that for a moment, Steve. You're right. Content development and management is a brand new idea, and it's an old idea, but it's being used better now. Namely, every message I send doesn't have to be a sales message.
Right.
It could be a warm, friendly. I know what you love the Cubs, and I saw an article, and I'm doing this for a customer. I sent him an article that I think he missed and he would enjoy.
Sure.
So there's no way to do a return on investment analysis easily about content because it's not a sales message, so I can't measure whether something's sold. But warming up relationships is a skill coming out of content work and thinking, and it's certainly more developed maybe, certainly. You know why? Because customers are bigger buyers in B2B, so you can go out and do a lot of content and warm up relationships because there's a lot coming back for you.
So and you've been inordinately generous with your time today, Phil. I could go on for hours, obviously, but let me just explore one final, I think, pivotal area. We talked a lot about trust earlier. The concept of brand intimacy is fundamental to this, but that's a platitude as opposed to a practice. And so I'm thinking that going forward, how do you envision the customer relationship or consumer relationship with brands going forward? Is it conceivable that it will form a set of concentric rings where at the very inner circle, the brands that you have high degree of trust in and are willing to invite them into your lives, be close to you, be part of you, do the exact same thing that you're talking about with Lego, and as you move to the outer periphery, that relationship gets more distant and distant to the point where the brands on the outer ring are faceless and have more of a utility role, a provisional role, as opposed to a fundamental integral role. Do you see the fundamental characteristics of the relationship between consumers and brands changing fundamentally in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction between, let's take a multi-brand company like Procter & Gamble and realize that some brands may have, more Unilever, that some brands have really touched and built a following, built a fan base. It's part of their lives. They're happy to be seen as it's like the woman who buys Burberry all the time, whatever. But that other brands that Unilever might have, let's say if there's some cleaning products, they are peripheral, and maybe Unilever won't ever discover that they have fans. They just are picked up, because Unilever is a good name. You can trust it. So that is true. But I think that customers, this would be a good study. I would like to find out in a group of asking each customer, are there any brands that are part of your life and you would be miserable if they died?
Absolutely.
And what are they? Tell me the ones that you would be so heartbroken that they vanished.
Phil, excellent question.
And there may be a lot of agreement on those brands. And as a matter of fact, I think I saw a piece of writing once about those few brands that people would really. It was that book about what brands do you love?
Yes.
Sisodia and Jag the Chef. They had a lot on the favorite American brands. Yeah. Out of love,
Well, it's interesting. I have a group of employees. I usually do orientation around the new marketing model we call it customer first thinking here. And I ask that question usually to start these sessions. I'm fascinated by the answers. I ask the very question you asked: what brand would they be sorry to see disappear tomorrow, that they would mourn its existence in the same way they would mourn the passing of a relative? And it was interesting, the last time I did this, Google was obviously mentioned as being fundamental, but a couple of others got mentioned were Dove from Unilever, and Sephora as the beauty brand, as somebody else raved about, of course, and they have built quite a cultish fan base on their loyalty program as well.
Mm-hmm. And you cannot build that with many brands. So it's quite a goal. It should be the goal, but it's not going to be possible with a lot of brands.
So my final question, Phil, is you've been writing about this profession, this discipline, if you will, for many years. You've coached, sort of taught many generations of students. You've been a beacon of inspiration for a lot of folks like myself who have your books on their shelves. What keeps you going? You've been at this a long time. What energizes you to keep writing about this, as opposed to retiring to some villa someplace in southern France? What is it that keeps you involved about marketing?
Well, I really haven't worked in my life. I've played in my life. I do what I can. As an academic, I'm free to study what I want and do with it what I want. And the field of marketing, if I was teaching geometry, it would be the most boring thing in the world because it hasn't changed for 2,000 years. I think finance has some of those attributes, trying to teach that again and again the same way, although there is some fintech. But the main thing is marketing was the right subject for me because it is evolving rapidly and is full of new innovations and stories and so on. So I decided that if someone asked me at the American Marketing Association, when am I going to retire? And I said, well, whenever I retire, I'm still not emeritus. I am teaching actively around the world. I'm not going to retire because I've never been working. I've been playing. I've been enjoying what and that gives me a lot of excitement to follow what's happening with companies. But the main thing is I have returned to some extent to the economist in me. When I took my job with Northwestern, they said, what do you want to do? Teach? You're a PhD in economics from two great schools, UC and MIT, and you could teach economics, managerial economics or microeconomics, or you could teach marketing. And I thought about that, and I realized that economics was pretty well structured. Big breakthroughs are not that likely to happen. Marketing was underdeveloped, terribly underdeveloped, very descriptive, and that I could do much more with it. And I'm glad I made that decision. But more recently, I've also added another dimension that will keep me from retirement, and that is I wrote the book on capitalism.
Yes.
Confront capitalism, and because I'm very worried about our capitalism. It's not, I'm in favor of Nordic capitalism, not American capitalism.
I hear you, yeah.
Because no one should have to worry about paying a health bill and paying $60,000 a year for college education. So then I wrote Democracy because I became doubly worried because the wealth concentration index is getting so high that no political person can get elected without a billionaire backing.
They call it the plutocracy. Yeah.
Yeah. And therefore, basically, the first thought of the politician is the donor.
Right.
So we've corrupted our democracy because of the concentration of wealth. And I would like to see higher taxes on the wealthy, which will include me and other people. We should be willing to get rid of. Did you read that in San Francisco? This wonderful guy, Mark Benioff, who runs Salesforce.
Salesforce.com. Yeah.
He's pledged to remove homelessness is a problem.
Yeah, I saw that just recently. Yeah, his interview. Yeah.
Yeah. He says there's some people who want to be homeless, so he won't be able to do much with them, but others. I love that view. So basically, I'm now working on a third book after the book on capitalism and then one on democracy, which is strategies for advancing the common good. And I noticed that that's a thing that has come out in one or two places. I think Robert Reich has a book on the common good, but I think that's the North Star. What policies make life better for more people and which ones don't?
Yes.
So I'm going to be doing some work. I've already written half the book about how do we advance life and life quality with all these things going on. And there's 3 chapters that come later. What can business do to advance common good? Second, what can government do to advance the common good? Because it should have been the agent for doing it, and it isn't doing it. And the third is, what can the nonprofits do to advance its common good? And the fact is that the fact that government has been emasculated from doing it has created a number of nonprofits that are highly invested in advancing some part of the common good. So that just brings you up to date with why I don't retire.
But it's symbiotic. You're describing in not so many words this concept of conscious capitalism, but there is this bridge to the role of marketing in being the conscience of companies, and this goes back to the whole concept of brand purpose. So there is connectivity here between a philosophy around doing what's best for all, not simply for the 1%, but also this idea of doing what's best in the interest of customers, and that is the concept of customer first thinking.
Yes, you're right. Thanks for pointing that out. That I'm not leaving marketing. I see marketing as an agent that plays an important role in advancing the common good.
It can lead social change. Yes, just the way you're describing Mark Benioff trying to do that. And others, certainly others are part of this conscious capitalism movement that I was describing earlier. Yeah. Phil, you have been remarkably generous. This has been an absolutely fascinating journey. One day we should try to reconnect and explore where you're going with some of your new thinking. But I wanted to say how much I appreciate the time you've given me today, and it's been fabulous.
Well, I learned a lot from you, Steve. You're a great interviewer, and independently have many ideas and thoughts, which I've been jotting some things down. But thanks so much for this opportunity.
Let's continue the dialogue. I'd love to stay connected. So, Phil, thank you very much again, and we'll be in touch again.
That concludes our conversation with Professor Kotler. I hope you found his views as refreshing and thought-provoking as I did. Look for future episodes of this podcast on customerfirstthinking.ca, where you'll also find blogs, white papers, infographics, and videos on the transformation of marketing. And finally, I'd like to thank my producers, Cam Campbell and Brent Morris, for their work in making this podcast happen. Until next time, thanks for listening.